All right, we would like to welcome you to our podcast for today. My name is Rich Cozart, and with me is Tad Bodeman, who is a licensed therapist. And today we're going to be talking about the coronavirus and how it has affected families and marriages, and specifically domestic violence.
Mm.
And we're going to discuss a few questions on that, and hopefully it's going to be helpful to you. So I want to introduce Tad, and perhaps Tad would want to share a few words.
Well, thank you, Rich. Yeah, this is a topic that's been really important to me. I began doing trauma work and work with domestic violence survivors as part of my clinical training. And as we started to enter this lockdown, I became really concerned about it and wrote some resources and pulled some information together really to help our community. So I'm really happy to be here and have a chance to talk with you today about that.
Very good. Very good. We sense that in situations like this pandemic, that there's going to be a heightened level of anxiety, obviously, and other mental challenges. So let's talk about this, and I'm going to ask the first question and ask Ted to be a part of it. The first question is this: how does this pandemic contribute to domestic abuse?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's not so much the pandemic itself, although that's creating a lot of tension and anxiety and stress for all of us. Under stress, we all tend to regress, right? So if we struggle with anger problems, emotional regulation issues, the stress of the uncertainty associated with the economy, our health, our community, our jobs, right, is causing a heightened experience of that aggression, of that emotional dysregulation. But to combine with that, the quarantine is really creating this double, sort of whammy effect, right? While abusers are increasingly more dysregulated, the most vulnerable in our society are finding themselves trapped 7 days a week, 24 hours a day with their abuser, as we've been asked to stay in our homes, avoid social contact, avoid social interactions. This is a recipe that's coming together and really accelerating the domestic violence, the intimate partner violence, the violence on our children, not just here in Houston, but across this country and really across the world right now, Rich.
Yes, very good, Tad. Yes, I believe with the heightened stress, it causes more conflict, and especially if an individual is predisposed to being an abuser, a situation like this can present more opportunities. Let me go on to the second question. Tad, what are the signs of domestic abuse?
Yeah, that's another great question, Rich. And they're not always as obvious as we might think, right? Domestic abuse, intimate partner violence is about controlling somebody's minds and emotion as much as it is about hurting their body. And when we're abused, it can become increasingly confusing to really adequately interpret what's really happening here. and the physical, we think initially about physical violence, but there's verbal abuse, there's emotional abuse, there's sexual abuse in addition to the physical violence. And the typical cases of physical violence don't usually happen right away. They creep up on us, and there's typically a ramp, but there's some really good signs of abuse. And Rich, I like to say, that the best one is if you're afraid of your spouse or your parent, that's a really big red flag. If you're afraid of them, if you feel like you're being abused, there's a really good chance that you may be. And it's worth getting some help. But there's some really important ways that we'll talk about here, I think, in a minute to do that. But things like if your spouse is threatening you or bullying you, if they're controlling your money, if they're isolating you from friends and family, which is really easy to do right now with this quarantine, right? And if your spouse is sexually abusing you, or your parents are sexually abusing you, those are really important signs to pay attention to and to look for in others, right? Signs that someone is being abused. Things to keep an eye out for really are when you hear about excuses for injuries. When you see a friend or a relative whose personality begins to change and low self-esteem, sort of starts showing up in somebody you thought of as confident in the past. When you see them constantly checking in with their spouse, never having their own money, not being able to make their own decisions, wearing clothes that kind of don't fit the season, right? Often people that are in an abusive situation, like now as the temperature's warming up, it might be really unusual to see somebody with long sleeves on right now, walking outside, and that can be a clue that they're covering up some signs of physical abuse.
Good. Good, excellent. And I know that there's also the elderly in our population who have suffered abuse. Sometimes we don't think of them suffering abuse from caretakers or perhaps adult children.
Very common.
We need to keep our eyes open to.
Yeah.
Well, this
and
brings.
I just add to that, Rich, if
Yes.
somebody comes to you and shares this, what an incredibly vulnerable thing to do for them. Listen.
Mm-hmm.
Believe what they're saying to you and take action. And we can talk a little bit about what those actions might be in a minute. Yeah.
Yes. Very good. And that brings us to our final question. What should a person do if they are the victim of domestic abuse?
Yeah. Such an important thing to think about. What we know in the research and the statistics is that the time when somebody is preparing to leave the home, that's the time when serious violence tends to increase and really show up. So somebody who might have just been verbally abusive, not unusual for them to become physically abusive or violent in the time when somebody's trying and preparing to leave. We've attached, Rich, to this webcast, a download for a safety plan. What we know is that planning for your safety in this situation becomes crucial to you remaining healthy and, in fact, alive. There's a couple of pieces that are really important, right? Women can't always avoid, people that are being abused, they can't avoid violent incidences, but they can prepare for them. Things like, thinking ahead and building a plan about if violence starts to occur, What kind of doors, windows, stairwells, escapes will I use? Where am I going to keep my purse and my keys, so that I can access them quickly in order to leave, right? Who am I going to tell about this violence, right? Having access to hotline numbers, to 911, to family or friends that might be able to come in and help you, right? Teaching your children about 911 and how to do that. These are the kind of things that are in the safety plan. And when you're preparing to leave, right? Battered women frequently leave the residences they share, and leaving must be done with a careful plan in order to avoid that increase of violence, right? So thinking ahead about where will I have money and extra keys? How will I, what important documents, and we've got a list of those that are available to you. Where am I going to keep copies of those documents? Can I open up a savings account to prepare to increase my ability for independence once I leave? Right? These are the kind of things that are really crucial. And then how am I going to leave in such a way that I'm not in a conflict with my abuser, right? What's the time and the place to do that are all really crucial parts of this safety plan that has been put together and is available for folks who are listening to this to download and share with their friends and family.
Yes, very much so. And we invite you to download that information if you so desire. I would add to just the importance of having safe people around you, having the information that Tad has spoken about, but are there safe people that you can confide in, that you can trust, who would be helpful to you? It would be, I think, a great benefit to have a number of people around you that you could call your support group.
And one of the barriers often to that, Rich, is the feelings of shame about this. God never intended you to be treated with anything less than dignity. And there's a sense of shame that can develop when that has slowly begun to change and you slowly enter into this experience of abuse. What I would say to that is people can love you and God can help you. And God put these people in your life, and I'd invite you to take the risk to be vulnerable enough to say, I need help. Because if you're in this situation, you're worthy of being helped.
There's life outside of an abusive relationship.
Absolutely.
And I believe what Tad is saying is not only does our faith say that, but also sound sociology and psychology say that we can pursue a safe, a healthy relationship outside of an abusive one. And that's what we hope for all of you today. Thank you for joining us today in our time together. And Tad, do you have any last comment before we sign off?
No, I just want to say thank you, Rich, for the opportunity to share this really important information at this time. And I just invite everybody to get access to the safety plan information, download it. And if you're in a process where you're unsure, we have resources at A Future and a Hope to provide you with discernment counseling to determine and discern, are you in a situation that you really need to depart from, right? And if you're a victim and you're in recovery from domestic violence, we've got therapists and counselors that are trained to come alongside of you and help you do the healing that you deserve to have in your life.
Very good. Thank you. It has been good to be with you today. And until next time, goodbye.
Thank you now.